away toward their shadows in the little stream, but its crystal depths were there no longer. Floating sawdust whirled in eddies on the surface, and the water was black as soot. Here and there the white belly of a fish lay upturned to the sun, for the cruel, deadly work of civilization had already begun. Further up the creek was a buzzing monster that, creaking and snorting when a flashing disk, rimmed with sharp teeth, biting a savage way through a log, that screamed with pain as the brutal thing tore through its vitals, and gave up its life each time with a ghost-like cry of agony. Further on, little houses were being built of fresh boards, and further on the water of the creek got blacker still. June suddenly clutched Bud's arms. Two demons had appeared on a pile of fresh dirt above them, sooty, begrimed, with black faces, black hands, and in the cap of each was a smoking little lamp. "Huh?" said Bub. "'Tain't nothin'." "Hello, Bill," he called bravely. "Hello, Bub," answered one of the two demons, and both stared at the lovely little apparition who was staring with such naive horror at them. It was all very wonderful, though, and it was all happening in Lonesome Cove. But Jack Hale was doing it all, and therefore it was all right, thought June, no matter what. Dave said, moreover, the ugly spot on the great beautiful breast of the mother was such a little one after all, and June had no idea how it must spread. Above the opening for the mines the creek was crystal clear as ever. The great hills were the same, and the sky and the clouds and the cabin and the fields of corn. Nothing could happen to them. But if even they were wiped out by Hale's hand, she would have made no complaint. A wood thrush flitted from a ravine as she and Bub went back down the creek, and she stopped with uplifted face to listen. All her life she had loved its song, and this was the first time she had heard it in Lonesome Cove since she had learned its name from Hale. She had never heard it thereafter without thinking of him, and she thought of him now while it was breathing out the very spirit of the hills, and she drew a long sigh, for already she was lonely and hungering for him. The song ceased, and a long wavering cry came from the cabin. "Soo-cow, Sooky, Sooky." Old Mother was calling the cows. It was near milking time, and with a vague uneasiness she hurried Bub home. She saw her father coming down from the cornfield. She saw the two cows come from the woods into the path that led to the barn, switching their tails and snatching mouthfuls from the bushes as they swung down the hill, and when she reached the gate, her step-mother was standing on the porch with one hand on her hip and the other shading her eyes from the slanting sun, waiting for her. Already kindness and consideration were gone. "Where you been, June? Hurry up now. You've had a long restin' spell while I've been a-workin' myself to death." It was the old tone, and the old fierce rebellion rose within June. But Hale had told her to be patient. She could not check the flash from her eyes, but she shut her lips tight on the answer that sprang to them, and without a word she went to the kitchen for the milking pails. The cows had forgotten her. They eyed her with suspicion and were restive. The first one kicked at her when she put her beautiful head against its soft flank. Her muscles had been in disuse, and her hands were cramped, and her forearms ached before she was through, but she kept doggedly at her task. Then she finished. Her father had fed the horses and was standing behind her. "It's mighty good to have you back again, little gal." It was not often that he smiled or showed tenderness, much less spoke it thus openly, and June was doubly glad that she had held her tongue. Then she helped her step-mother get supper. The fire scorched her face that had grown unaccustomed to such heat, and she burned one hand, but she did not let her step-mother see even that. Again she noticed with aversion the heavy, thick dishes and the pewter spoons and the candle grease on the oilcloth. She put the dishes down, and while the old woman was out of the room, attacked the spots viciously. Again she saw her father and Bub ravenously gobbling their coarse food, while she and her step-mother served and waited, and she began to wonder. The woman sat at the table with the men over in the gap. Why not here? Then her father went silently to his pipe, and Bub to playing with the kitten at the kitchen door, while she and her mother ate, with never a word. Something began to stifle her, but she choked it down. There were the dishes to be cleared away and washed and the pans and kettles to be cleaned. Her back ached, her arms were tired to the shoulders, and her burned hand quivered with pain when all was done. The old woman had let her do to the last few things alone and had gone to her pipe. Both she and her father were sitting in silence on the porch when June went out there. Neither spoke to each other nor to her, and both seemed to be part of the awful stillness that engulfed the world. Bub fell asleep in the soft air, and June sat and sat and sat. That was all, except for the stars that came out over the mountains and were slowly being sprayed over the sky, and the pipings of frogs from the little creek. Once the wind came with a sudden sweep up the river, and she thought she could hear the creak of Uncle Billy's water wheel. It smote her with sudden gladness, not so much because it was a relief and because she loved the old miller, but such is the power of association, because she now loved the mill more, loved it because the mill over at the Gap had made her think more of the mill at the mouth of Lonesome Cove. A tapping vibrated through the railing on the porch on which her cheek lay. Her father was knocking the ashes from his pipe. A similar tapping sounded inside at the fireplace. The old woman had gone, and Bub was in bed, and she had heard neither move. The old man rose with a yawn. "Time to lay down, June." The girl rose. They all slept in one room. She did not dare to put on her nightgown. Her mother would see it in the morning. So she slipped off her dress, as she had done all her life, and crawled into bed with Bub, who laid in the middle of it, and who grunted peevishly when she pushed him with some difficulty over to his side. There were no sheets, not even one, and the coarse blankets, which had a close, acrid odor that she had never noticed before, seemed almost to scratch her flesh. She had hardly been to bed that early since she had left home, and she lay sleepless, watching the firelight play hide-and-seek with the shadows among the aged, smoky rafters and flicker over the strings of dried things that hung from the ceiling. In the other corner her father and stepmother snored heartily, and Bub, beside her, was in a nervous slumber that would not come to her that night, tired and aching as she was. So quietly, by and by, she slipped out of bed and out the door to the porch. The moon was rising. The radiant sheen of it had dropped down over the mountainside like a golden veil, and was lighting up the white rising mist that trailed the curves of the river. It sank below the still crest of the pines beyond the garden and dropped on until it illuminated one by one the dewy heads of the flowers. She rose and walked down the grassy path in her bare feet, through the silent, fragrant emblems of the planter's thought of her, touching this flower and that with the tips of her fingers. And when she went back, she bent to kiss one lovely rose, and as she lifted her head with a start of fear, the dew from it shining on her lips made her red mouth as flower-like and no less beautiful. A yell had shattered the quiet of the world, not the high fox-hunting yell of the mountains, but something new and strange. Up the creek were strange lights. A loud laugh shattered the succeeding stillness, a laugh she had never heard before in Lonesome Cove. Swiftly she ran back to the porch. Surely strange things were happening there. A strange spirit pervaded the cove, and the very air throbbed with premonitions. What was the matter with everything? What was the matter with her? She knew that she was lonely and that she wanted Hale, but what else was it? She shivered, and not alone from the chill night air, and puzzled and wondering and stricken at heart, she crept back to bed. End of chapter 17.